2nd of February, and I bet everybody is itching to get on with that sowing and growing. February is still a really cold month, probably one of the coldest of the year. But we can still sow some seeds. Ideally indoors though, because these temperatures are still a little bit too cool for germination and most things. So you can quite easily sow some seeds, take them indoors, get them germinating, and if you're doing really cold hardy plants, which you should be doing at this time of year, once they've germinated and got to a certain size, just a few centimetres, you can bring them out into your greenhouses. And that's what we've been doing with things like brassicas. Got quite a few on go at the moment. Little Savoy cabbages, 9cm pots. But we started them off in these cells like that. Again, they're Savoy cabbages, smaller seedlings. Started indoors. Once they got to a couple of centimetres or so, we brought them out here, and they've been out here for weeks in all that cold. And because they're cold hardy plants, they're still growing, albeit slowly. And then we'll move them on to somewhere else. And that's broccoli that we did before Christmas. And we did a couple of different types, purple sprouting and green. These have been outside once again since before Christmas, and you can see they're looking perfectly healthy. So when it comes to sowing your seeds in February, you're still restricted to certain things unless you've got space indoors and grow lights, because we're going to be getting quite a lot of overcast days. And if we have overcast days, then your plants are going to be searching for light. They're going to stretch because the light's not adequate. So then you end up what we call leggy plants. And a leggy plant is never going to turn out to be a really healthy plant unless it's certain varieties that you can plant deeper and deeper. But that doesn't always work with every plant. So you're better off growing them indoors, giving them a little sunny window, that extra bit of warmth. And if you can afford to do it, a couple of grow lights over the top. And I don't mean expensive grow lights, these setups that use 1,000 watts. If you look back on previous videos, we used the little square LED lights, and they're only 18 watts to run. So they're basically taking hardly anything up. And then we've got some bigger square shop lights that were dropped on from Marketplace on Facebook. And again, they have 4 bulbs in each one, but the bulbs are only 18 watts. So if you want to do it on a small scale, like we're doing this year, then you could try a couple of lights like that. You can also get lights from Wilko's, and they're the lamps with their adjustable necks. You can bend them into any position that you want. And they sell bulbs, which give out what they call daylight, 6,500 Kelvin. So a couple of those over the top of a couple of trays of seedlings be perfectly fine just to get them going. Or you could wait and just do it naturally, like we did back in the day. And you're still going to get some nice plants. These have all been out all winter so far. And we've got quite a few things that are doing well. So if you haven't already started any of these off, your brassicas, which is your cabbages, cauliflowers, Brussels, kale, it'd be a good idea to start off a few of each right now. Take your trays indoors, and then you know once they've germinated and got to an half decent size, you can bring them back out and they'll thrive perfectly fine in your greenhouse, even in these temperatures. And also start some onions if you haven't done that already. We're doing quite a few from seed this year, and that's a batch of spring onions, which are doing alright. They're growing really slowly, it's to be expected. But we've also got some multi-sown bulbing onions as well, and a few trays of red onions. At the moment they're still indoors because they've just started on the way. But eventually they'll be coming out here. So your yellow onions, your red onions, your spring onions, if you've not sown seeds already, get them sown because they need a long growing season. And apart from those little seed trays that we've got going at the moment with the onions in, we've also been doing some in 10-litre pots, which is something that we do all through the year. These are spring onions, and we just direct sowed a few onion seeds into this pot, let them grow. Didn't bother with any thinning out whatsoever. Because when we grow these, we grow them for the onion greens. You can let them bulb up and get proper spring onions if you like, but we like these green tops to chop into little pieces and sprinkle onto as food as a nice little tasty garnish. And you can see that we've already took an harvest just by chopping all the way across these onions and then leaving them, and then they grow back. So then we can take another harvest and another one, which to me is better than just pulling it up for a little onion bowl when I know that I can get multiple harvests of green onions from one container. So if you wanted to, you could just get a little flower pot like that, fill it with a bit of compost, drop your seeds in and do what we do. While at the same time, you've got other sets growing on, ready to be planted out into ground or into containers again in spring as bunches of bulbing spring onions. And because they're really cold hardy, you can also start some peas. And we'll be doing a few different varieties this year. So you can sow your peas. Once again, be very wary of mice because they will dig those peas up and eat them. So you need to cover those. But you can get those going. They'll germinate perfectly fine indoors. And because they're cold hardy, you can bring them back outside and let them grow on and get a jump on season with those. And as we mentioned before, cauliflowers. These were grown at the beginning of December last year, and they were tiny little seedlings. We grew on the same way we did Savoy cabbages, transferring them from pot to pot until they got big enough, and then we popped them in here. And that's had no protection apart from a bit of fleece when it did drop down to -4. And these cauliflowers are looking really well. And so is this red cabbage. You can see that red cabbage in a little container has now got to a good size. Plus we've got an advantage that while they're in containers, we can keep them on benches off at ground and give them extra protection from slugs. And so far so good with these plants. I've also got some Chinese cabbages as well. They're a bit more a tender leafed variety and very susceptible to slug damage, as we've seen in one of the greenhouses that we planted up back in November. But the ones that we've got in pots are growing perfectly fine. And you might remember that I did say that when you're growing things like pak choi, you can let those grow to a good size, chop the tops off, leaving a couple of centimetres above that compost, and they'll grow their leaves back again. And we said we'd do that and see what happened, just to see if that is true, that we can get more than one harvest from a plant. If I bring you in a little closer, you can see where we harvested these cabbages. We just chopped right across and took the plant away and just left that root end sticking up out at compost. And now all those leaves are growing back. So not only did they grow all right through autumn and winter, and we had a few harvests off them, the ones that were just cut off and left the roots in place are now giving us a second harvest. So again, the Chinese cabbages do perfectly well in cold temperatures. And I know they do have a tendency to bolt if it gets too hot. So this time of year, leading up to spring, is probably the best time to be growing your Chinese cabbage. If you've not done it already, sow some broad beans as well. These are dwarf ones which we're going to keep growing in containers because this particular variety only grows to 16 inch tall. But they're very cold hardy plants, so you could just direct sow your seeds outside, but just be aware that if you don't give them some kind of protection, mice will dig those seeds up and eat them. And for me personally, I always think it's better to germinate in pots and then transfer outside, so when they go outside you've already got an established plant. So we just start them off by popping a seed in a 9 centimetre pot like that, When it gets to a few inches, you'll notice they've got quite an intense root system and you'll have to move them pretty quick. But we just upgraded to something a little bigger like that. And so far, so good. Then eventually we move them on again into these 2-litre pots. And you can see that this plant is doing really well. We're going to tie it to this stick as it grows, but it shouldn't get any higher than that, which makes them perfect for growing in containers. So if you've not already started off your broad beans, you can get those sown now. Carrots can be directly sown outside in ground. Something I actually never do at this time of year, because I find it's still a little bit too cold and carrots take a long time to germinate. So I like to stick to container carrots at the moment anyway. We will be doing some outside in drills in raised beds at some point, but for now, container carrots are going to work a lot better. And again, these have been in here since last year, and you can see that they're growing really well. And there's plenty of depth in a container to grow carrots. You're only going to get 4 or 5 inch carrots at best anyway at this time of year. And they're a long, slow growing plant. But another advantage of actually doing this is if you're growing carrots, at some point you're going to get problems with carrot root fly. But carrot root fly can't fly any higher than 60 centimetres. So if you just pop them on a bench, they'll never be able to get to them. So that's why all through the year we do more container carrots than we do outside in raised beds, because we can offer these plenty of protection. And we've not only got these, we've got some in a trough as well. I'll give you a quick look. We've got these ones happily growing away in this trough. And again, we're not looking for massive carrots out of this. We're just looking for an half decent harvest early season. The exact same way that we're doing this salad planter. We've got a mixture of salads in there. We've got a row of carrots. We've got some little spinach plants. We've got beetroots for salad leaves in between. And then a few spring onions at the back. So it's a multi-purpose salad planter that, although growing slow, is still trying. So we're not doing much of anything outside at the moment, because to be honest, it's not really worth it. It's too cold. And we're quite happy just starting things off indoors in containers, because it's more reliable. We're going to use less compost and we can protect them a lot better if needed be. Even with these onions that we're doing, we started these off in little egg boxes with a bit of compost, just so they got a root system growing. And as they did, they then started to produce these green shoots. That one's splitting off nicely, and so's that one. And these onions will quite happily grow in this container until they reach full size, because onions are shallow rooted. So just to get things going without putting them outside in that freezing ground, we've done a few of these, and we'll be doing a lot more. Once we get to the beginning of March, we'll be putting all those other onion sets outside in beds, because it will be that little bit warmer and that little bit lighter for longer. But for now, we're quite happy doing this, because we're still going to get something. And if you've not seen previous videos, that's how we start them off. In these old egg boxes, I just drill holes in bottom to get drainage. We plant them in a little bit of compost, and then they'll start sprouting, and you'll be getting roots growing in bottom. So you've already got a good start on season by doing that. And we're going to be planting quite a few more of those for the same effect, so that when we plant them outside in March, we've not lost any time. We've actually got a jump on season. So if you've not done that before, try that this year. You can also start and sow things like beetroot, salad leaves, spinach, things like that. They're easy to grow, they're fast growing, they're also cold hardy. But once again, anything like that, start it indoors. It'll make your life so much easier, and you'll get better germination rates. So we're starting off some salads indoors, and we're not doing art in lettuce. We're doing cut and come again lettuces, because they're just more convenient for what we want. You've got to wait a long time for a lettuce to art up, like an iceberg that you find in supermarkets. So it's nice and firm. But we don't bother doing that because if we fill a container with seeds of different varieties, we can just cut the leaves as we want them as they grow. And that's why they call it cut and come again, because once you've cut all the bigger outside leaves away, the smaller ones in the middle will start to grow. So you get a supply of lettuce for 3 to 4 cuttings out of one container, which is a lot better than waiting for an iceberg to mature in your greenhouse or outside in your raised beds, where it's constantly going to be under attack from slugs and snails. And we all know we don't want to be eating any lettuces that you know have had slugs and snails on them. Even though you peel them back layer after layer after layer until you know it's 100% clean, it's still in the back of your mind and it still puts you off. So that's why lettuces we like to do in containers, and again on raised benches. So if you've not done any salad leaves, including beetroots, get some of those going. Get some carrots going. We've also got these growing, the parsnips. And again, 10 litre pot, growing quite happily in there. These have been outside again since last year, since the start of last autumn. And we've not had no problems with them. And we're only doing them in containers because all we want is some baby parsnips. If we wanted, we could leave them to grow even longer because this has got plenty of depth to it. But if I can get baby parsnips from this, I'll be quite happy. So parsnips is something you can try. And remember, if you've got parsnip seeds from last year, there's a very good chance that they're no longer viable. Parsnip seeds, for some reason, never seem to last beyond that first year when you buy them. And I've tried and tested this quite a few times over the years. And using parsnip seeds from the year before has never worked. I've never had any germinate. So I always get a new pack of seeds every year. And to be fair, they only cost pence and we don't grow lots and lots. So if you haven't done your parsnips, you could start some of those off because they definitely need a long growing season. Hopefully by now you'll have got your seed potatoes. Because if you've got your seed potatoes now, once again, you need to prepare for that. If you're putting them outside, you need to get that ground prepared. If you're doing them in containers like we are, make sure you've got your containers nicely cleaned out and your compost on way. We've got 12 bags on order, which should be here in the next couple of weeks, which is going to fill pretty much all the containers we're going to need for the entire season. And we know we've got good quality stuff as well. But if you are doing potatoes, regardless of where you're going to be planting them, you need to make sure you chit them first. We've done a video on that previous to this one. But everybody lives in different parts of the country, so it's going to be different for quite a few people. All you need to do is find out when your last frost date is. Go back 6 weeks from that, which is probably going to be somewhere around this time, or maybe in a week or so. And that's when you need to start and chit those potatoes. Get them sprouting so that when you put them in your containers, you know they're on the way. So if you've not already bought your seed potatoes, think about getting some of those. Think about getting yourself some onion sets ready to do the same thing, to grow on in little containers, just to get them started, so that when it comes time in spring, you can just pop everything out where it's going to go, and you've already again got that head start. And next month we'll be doing lots and lots of other different things as well, because March, April is probably going to be the busiest time of year when it comes to sowing and potting on plants as well. But if you haven't already started your peppers, you need to get them started as soon as possible, because again, they need a really long growing season, and you're going to have to start those indoors. They won't germinate at a temperature of less than 75 degrees. So ideally, you need to sow some seeds and put them in an airing cupboard. It's got to be warm night and day for those seeds to germinate, unless you've got a little heat mat you can pop them on, which would be ideal. But if not, anywhere that maintains a decent temperature. And we know this year there's problems with energy crisis, one thing and another. So it's not really feasible, even for me at this time of year, to start thinking about setting up lots of heat mats and grow lights. Because at some point, the cost of those is going to outweigh the value of what you're growing, which is not what we're doing it for. So this year, I've got a couple of little lights, a few things growing underneath, and that's about as far as I'm taking it. From now on, I'm just going to rely on doing it the natural way. And to be fair, years gone by, that's the only choice that most growers had before all this technology appeared. So if you hadn't started peppers, being sweet bell peppers or chili peppers, you need to get those seeds done, because they need a really long growing season to see anything off them at all. Keep those indoors. And if you're thinking about doing your tomatoes, your aubergines, your cucumbers, in my opinion, I'd say just wait a little longer. Because once those plants germinate and get established, they tend to grow quite quick. Because at light levels that we've got at the moment, and the temperatures, you won't be able to put them outside. It'd be too cold and it'd kill them off in no time. So you'd have to keep them indoors. And then you've got to, once again, provide them with adequate light. Because you're going to get long, stretched plants, which ultimately will end up producing a poor harvest, which we don't want. So start your chilies, start your sweet bell peppers, leave your tomatoes and your cucumbers for a few weeks' time. And once again, we'll be starting those indoors. But I don't want to let them grow much more than a few inches tall before it's time to get them outside. And obviously, in this part of the country, it's not 100% safe to put any of your tender plants outside in a greenhouse until May, which is quite a way off. So think about that depending on what part of the country you live in. And we'll do a little video showing the things that we've actually got growing indoors at the moment. We've got one or two things, not lots, but you can see that they're doing all right. And one key thing to remember is, whatever you choose to sow and grow between now and spring, remember, if you've started it indoors, you've got to harden those plants off. You won't be able to just take out your plants that have reached a nice mature age. The sun's out, it's spring, it's a lot warmer. If you put them straight outside into your greenhouses from indoors, you'll shock those plants. They're not acclimatized to the different changes in weather outdoors. They're not used to any winds or cold snaps. And there's a very good chance that if you don't harden them off, you could lose a lot of your plants that way. And the way to harden your plants off is to bring them out when the weather's warm, not necessarily in full sun either, because they're not used to that. It could cause scorching on the leaves. So just bring them out a couple of hours a day, then take them back in at night, and do that for about a week. And in that time, your plant will have got used to those different changes in light levels and temperatures, and then you'll be perfectly fine. We have got quite a few things going off, as I said, indoors, and we'll get round to having a look at how they're doing quite shortly. But for now, that's quite a few things that you can actually be doing for your seed sowing and growing in February. Even though it is really early in here, you can see that some things are quite happy to grow, even outdoors. If you've not already subscribed to this channel and you want to see what else we're doing all the way through February on that lead up to spring, then please hit that subscribe button and press that notifications bell. And we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.